Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this video. I hope you're doing great. What we're about to do is what's called, it's actually an Algebra 2 concept that I would have never thought about presenting within a geometry class, but when I started seeing some of these PARCC tests and seeing some of the practice problems that were coming out, I was like, why in the world would that be on the test, okay? I'd never taught it before, and I was like, well, let's take a look at it, and let's see if we can present a couple of problems like it, so that maybe some of our students would be able to pass this problem or be able to do well in this problem. Now, the one thing I do want to tell you is that this concept's not hard. It's actually very simple. It's just making sure you know about it or have heard of it when you come to the PARCC test. And so I start off this worksheet here. There's only going to be 7 problems that deal with this completing the square concept. So I start off this worksheet right here by just reviewing some of the concepts that we've already talked about, making sure that those concepts are solidified in your mind. So looking at number 2, we want to write the equation of the circle with the given center and radius. And so the center is at 4, 7, the radius is 12. And so hopefully you're already jotting this down. Know this pretty well by now, but if our equation is going to be x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to the radius squared, that's what I'd be looking for number 2. Okay? Alright, so hopefully you had something like that jotted down already, and you can work through those. Now, just something to think about. If you don't know 8.2, what 8.2 is, you can always plug that into your calculator when you square it and get the answer. Hopefully you know what radical 15 is squared to get the answer. I'll just give you a heads up. When you plug this stuff into your calculator, like this one right here, if you were to plug the radius squared in your calculator like this, you would get it wrong. Okay? It'd probably give you an output of 6. And the reason is it's not squaring everything. And so make sure you put parentheses around the whole thing. Just a heads up, what the calculator is doing is this. Okay? Squaring through radical 2, multiplying it together. And all it's doing is taking 3 times 3, which is 9. And hopefully you know what radical 2 times radical 2 is. And it should give you an output of 18. Okay? So just kind of giving you a heads up there. If we skip down to number 9 real quickly here, we know that h and k are present here. But remember that because of the negatives that were present in the original standard form, as I write that out up here, remember that because of these negatives here and here, it's going to flip the signs of whatever it is within the actual equation. So we have a positive 6, so the center is at negative 6, negative 7, positive 7. And then from there, the radius, since this is the radius squared, okay, we're going to square root that. And what you're going to notice there, I don't have this memorized off the top of my head, but what you should notice is that the square root of 90.25 is going to end up being a fairly simple number. Let's see here. And I have 9.5. So in your calculator, you can go ahead and type that in, and maybe you want to go backwards too. If you square this, do you get 90.25? And I think you will. Okay? So now onto the concept that we're going to be covering today. We want to go and complete the square. Okay, determine the center and the radius for the following circles. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to group these values with their like terms. And so x squared, there's nothing to be grouped with it, so I'm going to leave it by itself. Over here I've got y squared plus 4y. I'm going to put a plus, and I'm going to put something there in just a second, and then I have 5 on this side. Okay? Now from there, I have to figure out what's going to go right here so that I can complete the square, so that we can end up with this. The standard form, as I wrote just a second ago, is that right there. And we need to figure out what these values are. They are a constant term, a term. It doesn't have a variable next to it. We got to figure out what that value is, and it's part of a square, okay? And so as I look at this last part, algebra tells us that if we go ahead and take half of the b term, okay, we remember the quadratic formula, we have a, b, and c, half of the b term, and square it, that will give you what goes in here for the c term, if it's going to be a completed square. So if I take half of positive 4, and I square that, half of 4 is 2, and 2 squared is 4. So I'm going to put that in there, and whatever you add to one side, you're going to add to the other side. Okay? Now, to make sure that this trinomial is a part of a perfect square up here, here's what I'm going to do. X squared, and then I'm going to do plus parentheses y. So the factors of y squared would be y and y. The factors of 4 will either be 4 and 1 or 2 and 2, but if the middle term is 4, it's going to be 2 and 2. Okay? And then from there, since both terms are positive, this is going to be positive as well. Now, one thing that I observed as you go through these type of examples is this. Okay? Just adding those two together. It is this, that this term right here is what you're going to get inside here. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we look at that. Half of positive 4 is 2. So from there, the center can be determined by, well, there's nothing over here, so it'd be 0. The opposite of this one, negative 2, with the radius of the square root of 9, which is 3. Okay, and that's what we're looking for there. So I'm confident that once you get to this point, you can go ahead and figure out your center and radius. It's just getting to that point is usually the hard part. All right, let's take a look at number 14, a little bit more complicated problem here. And let's see here. I'm going to group them together like I did in the last one. X squared minus x plus something plus y squared plus y plus something is equal to negative 1/4. Okay? Now you see what I did there with that 1/4? It really isn't a part of this perfect square, and you'll see why in just a second. So I subtracted it from both sides of the equation. You may be asking, how did I know that? Well, if I were to go ahead and look at these three terms right here, the factors of y squared would be y and y. The factors of 1/4 are either 1/4 and 1 or 1/2 and 1/2. Again, dividing 1/4 by 2. You get 1/2, or not dividing by 2, 1/2, square rooting 1/4. Where am I going here? Oh, the square root of 1/4 is 1/2 and 1/2. So as a result, if I take y, let's see here. Can it work that way? One-fourth, so 1/2, and 1/2 will be 1/4, 1/2 y. That might work out. Let's try that. I hadn't thought about that. Okay. All right. Well, let's see here. Plus 1/4 is equal to 0. Well, let's try that and see if that works out. So over here, I said I was going to take half of this. Now that's negative 1, so 1/2 of b times negative 1, and then square that. Now what we have here is half of negative 1 would be negative 1/2. Squared gives us positive 1/4. Okay, and whatever I add to one side, I'm going to do the other side as well. Okay? And so I said whatever's in here is going to be what I'm going to put in the parentheses. So half of negative 1 is going to be negative 1/2. Okay, now to double check that, x minus 1/2, x minus 1/2. So we have x squared minus a half x minus a half x. So there's the negative 1 that we were looking for. And then positive 1/4. Well, there you go. Okay. That b term holds true. For the other one, plus y, I guess it'll be plus a half. Let me see here. If we do y plus 1/2 and y plus 1/2, you have y squared plus 1/2 plus 1/2 y plus 1/4. So there's your plus 1. Okay, and then you have plus 1/4. I guess I didn't have to do that. So in the end, we didn't have, the only thing we had to add to this side was the 1/4. Okay, and so as a result, the center is going to be at 1/2 comma negative 1/2 with a radius of the square root of 1/4. Now the square root of 1/4 is actually 1/2, which is what I was stumbling over earlier as I was trying to talk that through. So the big thing I want to make sure that you understand is if you're going to leave this third term, this c term here, make sure that it agrees with everything that you have underneath this parentheses here. If it doesn't, then we haven't done something correctly. Okay, we have to get rid of it and then find it. We have to complete that square. Okay. All right, let's go to the back side now. Okay. Let's go ahead and do 15 and 17 together, and the rest of those, the rest of the worksheet, I'd like you to go ahead and complete on your own for tomorrow. So, if I do what we've been doing on the previous problems, grouping these together, x squared minus 0.8x plus something plus y squared plus 10y plus something is equal to negative 4. Okay. Now from there, we said we were going to take half of negative 0.8, or of b, and we're going to square that. So half of negative 0.8 is going to be negative 0.4, and if we square negative 0.4, we get a positive 0.16. So I'm going to add 0.16. Okay. And then for this one over here, to complete this square, I'm going to take half of positive 10, and I'm going to square that. So half of 10 is 5, and 5 squared is 25. Okay. Now, from there, again, I said whatever we get in here goes down here in the parentheses. So it would be x, half of negative 0.8 is going to be minus 0.4. And then for the other one, y half of 10 is 5, so plus 5. And that would equal 21.16. Okay, now I always want to check to make sure that I've completed the square correctly. And so if I do both these, x minus 4 times x minus 4, we have x squared minus 4x minus 4x, and then plus 16. Okay, so here's your negative, oh, it was 0.4, sorry, 0.16. There we go. Okay, so here's your negative 0.8, which we had there, and you got your positive 0.16, which we have there, which is good, so we've completed that one correctly. And then we have y plus 5 and y plus 5. What does that equal? I'm going to put it over there, put it down here. Y times y is y squared plus 5y plus 5y plus 25. So we have plus 10y up there, plus the 25. We've got that there. We've completed our square correctly. Okay. So our center is going to be at the opposite of this, positive 0.4, and the opposite of this, negative 5. Okay. And then the radius length is the square root of 21.16. Well, when you plug it in your calculator, it ends up being a pretty nice decimal, 4.6. And so that's how you figure out the last part there. Okay. All right, so again, hopefully it's all making sense to you. The last one we're going to work on is number 17 together. And number 17, you notice a big difference right from the get-go. One, you don't have just a normal x squared, you've got a 2/3 x squared. So not only do you not have a whole number next to x squared, you have a fraction. And we've talked quite a bit, and I think based on opinion polls, most of us don't like fractions, so we always try to figure out how to get rid of them, how to manipulate the equation to get rid of those fractions. I am going to multiply everything. I'm going to get rid of the 17 so we see the whole problem. I'm going to multiply every term within this parentheses by 3/2. That will get rid of all the fractions within in the problem. Okay? So when we do that, I should say almost all of them. You'll see what I mean in a second. So 2/3 times 3/2 gives us just 1, so it's x squared. Plus, this would be 30/2, it should be 15x. I'm going to put a plus, so we're going to complete that square. And then again, 2/3 and 3/2 cancel each other out. -4 times 3 is -12, divided by 2 is -6. So we have -6y. I'm going to put a plus that. And then -19.5 times 3/2 is actually going to give you a -29.25. So when I said it gets rid of all the fractions, I was wrong. There's a fraction there at the very end, but I'm just going to use it as a decimal. Okay? All right, so again, we're going to take half of b, half of 15, and we're going to square that. So half of 15 is 7.5. 7.5 times or squared is going to be 56.25. So 56.25. And we're going to add that over here as well. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. Okay, and right here, I'm going to do half of -6, and we're going to square that. And so we end up with a positive 9. Okay, and so making sure it's the perfect square, I'm going to plug in that right there. So we have x plus 7.5 squared plus y minus 3, again getting that number from that part right there, squared is equal to, what do we have here, 36. That's a nice perfect square. All right, again, want to double check to make sure that I have completed these squares correctly. So we have x plus 7.5 times x plus 7.5. If we do that, x squared plus 7.5x plus 7.5x plus 56.25. And if you look here, that's 15. 56.25, everything looks good. Okay. Y minus 3, y minus 3. If we do that, y squared minus 3y, minus 3y, and plus 9, and here's your minus 6y. So we've completed that one correctly as well. Okay. So the center is going to be at -7.5 comma positive 3 with a radius of 6, which is the square root of 36. Okay. So for the remainder of the period and for your homework tonight, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and completing the rest of that worksheet there. Again, I know freshmen were past the park test here, but the reason why I wanted to do it was because I'm probably going to have to try to put this ahead next year, and just wanted to see how this played out as a lesson. So thanks for your attentiveness. Have a great night.